There are three words that can erase 80% of a watch's value in less than 30 seconds. They cost almost nothing to add. They take less than a coffee break to do. The most reputable dealers, the most prestigious auction houses, and even the manufacturer's own service centers have all been caught doing it. The watch you bought yesterday from someone you trusted is the one you should be most worried about. The worst part is, when these three words appear on a service receipt, they do not sound like a warning. They sound like quality assurance. The three words are, has been polished. I still struggle to explain one part of this story. One of the most prestigious manufacturers in watchmaking spent decades quietly destroying their customers' watches at the customer's own expense. That is something the industry has never reckoned with. My name is Lucas. Let's take a look at the three most expensive words in modern collecting. For nearly 100 years, the watch industry treated polishing as routine maintenance, restoration even. Every authorized service center did it. Dealers did it. Owners requested it. The entire industry agreed polishing was care. Then came October 26, 2017. Phillips Auction House, New York. A small lot crossed the block, Paul Newman's personal Rolex Daytona reference 6239, the watch he had worn through the 1970s and gifted to his daughter Nell's boyfriend, James Cox, in 1984. The hammer fell at $17,752,500, world record at the time. The most expensive wristwatch ever sold, and the single phrase that mattered most in the catalog was not Paul Newman. It was four small words at the bottom: unpolished case, original lugs. For a century, the watch industry had been doing the equivalent of restoring a Renaissance fresco by repainting the colors. Every polish was a small act of erasure. The cleaner a vintage watch looked, the more value had been quietly removed. Those four words were the entire reason the watch sold for the price of a small skyscraper. But the Newman Daytona is not the strangest part. The people responsible for the most polishing in vintage history are not dealers. They are not even auction houses. They are the names you trust most. First, the mechanism. A vintage Rolex case from the 1960s was machined with sharp factory chamfers. The angled edges where the lug meets the side, where the case meets the bezel. Those edges are the watch's signature. They prove the case is original. They prove nobody has been near it with a wheel. A typical polish removes between 0.05 and 0.1 millimeters of metal. That sounds like nothing, but case lugs are only a few millimeters wide. After 2 or 3 polishes, the chamfers are gone, the lugs rounded, and the factory tool marks erased. The case is, in a literal sense, no longer the case the factory shipped. A 1969 Rolex Submariner, reference 5513, when polished, sells today for around $10,000. The same reference, the same year, with its original factory finish and sharp lugs intact, sells for $30,000 or more, 3 times the price. The only difference is whether someone at some point touched it with a wheel. It's the same dynamic that destroys value in vintage furniture, classic cars, and original pressings of records. The market eventually realized restored was a euphemism for diminished. Watches were the last category to figure it out. By the late 2010s, catalogs from Phillips, Christie's, and Sotheby's listed unpolished, original chamfers and factory finish as primary descriptors. Specialists like Eric Wind and Pucci Papaleo built reputations on identifying virgin cases. The goal of vintage watch buying wasn't pristine, it was original. My first vintage watch was a 1980s Rolex date, just I bought from a dealer who told me it had been professionally serviced. I was 25. I didn't know professionally serviced was code for polished. By the time I sold it 5 years later, I had lost more on it than I had spent on my first car. Polishing remains the single largest destroyer of vintage watch value in modern collecting. Bigger than theft, bigger than damage, bigger than mechanical failure. The part the industry has never been willing to talk about is something I had to read 3 times before I believed it. The largest single source of polished vintage watches in the world was not a sleazy back alley dealer. It was the company that made the watch. For decades, some of the most prestigious manufacturers in Switzerland, names that sit at the absolute top of horology, names like Patek Philippe, had a standard service procedure that included polishing the case. By default, without customer instruction, a customer would send in a watch worth tens of thousands for a movement service, pay a four-figure invoice, and receive back a watch with a sharper-looking case and tens of thousands less in market value. Both the labor and the value loss were charged to the customer. It is almost exactly like paying a museum to clean a painting and getting back a watercolor. Patek Philippe eventually shifted toward more conservative restoration after a sustained collector revolt. But by then, an entire generation of watches had already been altered. Specialists estimate that the majority of vintage Swiss luxury sport watches made before 1990 have been polished at least once. The unpolished survivors today were preserved mostly by accident, locked in safes, forgotten in drawers, or owned by people who never serviced them. That is why the Newman Daytona was worth $17 million. That is why a Virgin Submariner sells for 3 times a polished one. 3 words on a service receipt, "has been polished," represent one of the largest, quietest transfers of value in luxury collecting history. And almost none of it was done by villains. It was done by the people customers trusted most. In luxury markets, the most expensive damage is almost always done in the name of care. Not by thieves, not by accidents, by the people who issue invoices for it. It is the same logic that drives planned obsolescence in smartphones, that turns vintage cars into over-restored showpieces, that powers an economy of maintenance built to extract money and convert it into invisible loss. If you own a vintage watch or ever plan to buy one, the most valuable skill you can develop is to read a case the way a collector does. Sharp lugs, original chamfers, factory tool marks. The imperfections are the value. The near-new condition is the warning sign. 3 small words can erase more value than 100 years of wear ever could. Have you ever sold a watch and regretted it? Have you ever found out too late what serviced really meant? Drop your story in the comments below.